Resourceful Designer, episode 66, Getting Productive with Projects and Tasks.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing.
And now, your host. The first car he ever bought was a Pontiac Firefly. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to a new episode of the podcast. I'm glad you can join me today as we discuss running our graphic design businesses. Now, I have a great topic to share with you today about the difference between projects and tasks and how knowing that difference can actually make you a more productive graphic designer. But before I get to that, just share a little bit of what's been happening with me lately. Now, you remember last episode, I talked about the golf scorecards that I was working on, a great project that I do every few years. Well, that one kind of came back and bit me a little bit in the butt. It wasn't that much of a big deal, but I completed everything, got the approval from the client, got everything signed off on, and this was a project, I was not print brokering on this, so I handed off the files to the client and they sent them off to whatever printer they were using. There's a printer who specializes in golf scorecards or something like that. So anyways, the files got sent off to the printer and I sent off my invoice and everything. Well, a couple of days ago, I got an email from the client forwarding an email from the printer just saying, Mark, can you take care of this, please? And the email was basically saying that this is a beautiful design, but it's 4.5 inches tall and the scorecards are only supposed to be 4 inches. Can you please adjust? Now, I did them 4.5 inches because they've always been 4.5 inches. It's the same artwork I had used last time, and I checked back, like every time I've done these scorecards, they've always been 4.5 inches tall. But this time around, for some reason, and I don't know if they told the client and the client just didn't tell me, because when we went over all the specs with the client, the size, I even asked, are they the same size as last time? And they said yes. So anyways, I ended up having to pull that one out again and readjusting and fixing everything to lose 1/2 inch off the bottom of the card, or well, a bottom top, lose 1/2 inch off the height of the scorecard. So it just goes to show, even when you have the discussions with your clients and you get everything down and all the specs and all the contracts and everything are signed, there's still the possibility for something to go wrong. Now, luckily, I was able to charge the client. I told him, I says, look, everything you told me, this was the size. So now I have to spend more time. So, and he was very gracious and he understood, and he told me to send him a new invoice. So that was taken care of. And now I'm just looking forward to seeing them printed. Now I have a little bit of a confession to make. I've been really distracted this week. I don't know if you're a Walking Dead fan or not, but I recently downloaded the Walking Dead game No Man's Land onto my iPad just to see it. I watch Walking Dead every week and I watch Talking Dead afterwards, and they talk often about this game. So finally I decided to download it and give it a try. Well, I won't say I'm addicted, but as I'm working, I've got my iPad next to me with the game loaded. Now, it's one of those turn-based games, and it's the higher you get, you purchase things and you have to wait like a certain amount of time for, like, say you want to build a building, you might have to wait a couple of hours for the building to finish. So I'm not actually doing any missions or anything while I should be working, but I'm keeping an eye on all the production stuff that's happening. And as soon as one building's finished being built, then I'll start a new building, or when one character has been upgraded to a certain level, I'll upgrade another character. So it's been distracting as I'm working because I keep this thing open next to me, and a little message or notification will pop up. It's like, this is completed. Do you want to do another task? So I'll go grab it. And anyways, so today I left the iPad in the bedroom because it was just getting to me where I'd be in the middle of designing something and all of a sudden I'd see a notification pop up and it's like, ooh, stop what I was doing, move over to the game. And anyways, so that's been happening this week. As I said, I just downloaded on the weekend. So it's just this week it's been happening, and I have to nip that one in the bud because I know myself, when I get into these games, I do get addictive. And I just have to tell myself, okay, no more iPad in the office. I'll leave it in the bedroom or in the living room or in the kitchen or somewhere. Maybe I'll look at it when I go for lunch or something, but I can't bring it in if I'm going to keep playing that game. So anyways, that's been my week this week. And moving on. Now, this week, I want to share a resource of the week with you. And this week's resource is Udemy. Now, if you're not familiar with Udemy, at udemy.com, that's udemy.com, it's a great online source for courses. Now, they have all sorts of courses and all sorts of material, but they have a lot of them that related to the design field. And at the time I'm putting this out, Udemy is actually having a sale right now. Now, the sale is only on until April 1st. So if you're listening to this after April 1st, sorry, you've missed out on the sale. But right now, almost all classes on Udemy are $10. And some of them, might just be a little bit of a savings, but some classes, you're saving a bundle. Now, I personally went in and I bought a class on typographic logos. I thought it looked interesting. And for $10, I'll check out what somebody else is doing and how they're going about it. I'll probably learn something for it, and $10 it's a steal. I also purchased one on Google Analytics. I use Google Analytics all the time, but that is such a monster of a program, and it has so many things involved with it that I'm sure there's things that I could be using it for or could be doing within it that I don't know. So for $10, I purchased a course on Google Analytics that I'm going to watch and hopefully learn something new about. Now, there are lots of other courses there that if you're interested in, especially if you're somebody starting out and you're not quite sure, maybe you're a student, at $10 a course, if you can get it during this sale, is great. There's one, the Ultimate Photoshop Training from Beginners to Pro, which is normally a $200 course, and you can get it for $10. So Udemy often has sales, but this is a really good one where almost all their classes are offered at $10. So if you're able to get it, if you're listening to this podcast when it comes out and you're able to get in there, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Udemy promo, and that'll give you the promo code to get the classes at $10. Now, even without the promo, I do encourage you to just check out what Udemy has to offer and sign up to their email list because, as I mentioned, they have these sales often enough. Maybe not for all their courses, but they do often have sales, and it's a great resource for learning things. As I said, especially if you're a new designer or somebody just getting started, or you're a student, or you just need a refresher. Maybe you've been out of the industry for a while, or you want to go in a new direction. You want to learn web design, you want to learn print design. There's something there for you. So once again, in order to use the promo, or at any time if you want to check them out, resourcefuldesigner.com/Udemy promo will direct you to the site. And yes, that is an affiliate link. If you do sign up using that URL, I do get a small commission on the purchase you make. I just want to put that out there for full transparency. And now, today's main topic, getting productive with projects and tasks. Do you ever look at your to-do list and feel overwhelmed? Do you ever find yourself procrastinating on certain jobs that are on your to-do list because you're just not quite sure where to start? Do you ever look at your to-do list at the end of the day and feel like you haven't really accomplished anything? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then there's a good chance that you're not using your to-do list correctly. But have no fear. Today, I'm going to share with you the proper way to use a to-do list, or more accurately, to-do lists. You see, if you're having problems working through your to-do list, it's probably because you're putting projects on it instead of tasks. What's the difference, you ask? Well, that's what I want to share with you today. And trust me, when you start looking at each one separately, you will notice just how easy it is to get things done and to be more productive. Now, the basics are this. A task is something that can be accomplished in one session, whereas a project is made up of multiple tasks. That's really all there is to it. It's that simple. If what you want to accomplish requires more than one thing for you to do, then it's classified a project. If whatever you want to accomplish only requires a single thing to be done in order to complete it, it's a task. And the trick to being productive is to only put tasks on your to-do list. As for your projects, create a separate list for your projects. I myself have a book here that I keep. It's actually a Bilbo Baggins book from the Hobbit movies. Whenever I purchase my Blu-ray, this book came with the Blu-ray, and I've been using it for my projects. And I mark down every time I get a new project. So if a client calls me up, like I had those golf scorecards on here, I have every website that I'm working on, the business cards that I'm doing for another client, the logo designs I'm doing for another client, the t-shirt I'm doing for another one. I have all of those listed in this book. Those are the projects I'm currently working on. And they're quick and easy to look at and see, okay, what projects do I have on the go? And I can see, do I have 5 projects, 10 projects, 20 projects? How many do I have on the go? But that book, or that list is good just to keep track of that sort of thing. It's not a production list. It's not my to-do list. For that, I just use scrap paper. Now, you can use an online system that'll break everything down, but what it all comes down to is your to-do list should include only tasks and not projects. You can put projects down as your headers, but the actual to-do items should be tasks. So what I want you to do is look at your current to-do list, the projects that you're currently working on. They may be stuff you're doing for your clients. They may be things you're doing for yourself, but whatever. I want you to identify each one and divide it up into the tasks that make up the project, and then write them down on your to-do list. Now remember, a project can be divided into either smaller projects or into individual tasks, but a task cannot be divided. It's one single item. And a task could be something that can take as little as a couple of minutes, or a task could be something that'll take several hours. But the trick into defining it as a task is, in order to accomplish it, you should only have to do one single thing. And once that thing is done, the task is finished. Now, in case this is getting a little bit complicated, let me share an example with you. Let's say there's a brand new gym opening up in your area, and they've called it Awesome Fitness. Ooh, what a great name, eh? Awesome Fitness is opening up in your area, and they've hired you to be their graphic designer, and they want you to create the brand around this new gym. So there, right off the bat, would be your main project. You're going to brand Awesome Fitness. Great. You can write that on your project list. Now, you might want to divide that down, because branding a project like this can be divided into several smaller projects. You're going to have to design a logo. You're going to have to design business cards and stationery. Maybe they want a flyer, a postcard, posters, banners, websites, and whatever other marketing material they want. Could be t-shirts, hats, jackets, towels, whatever. Now, each one of those that I just mentioned is a sub-project of branding Awesome Fitness Gym. Now, when you look at each one of those projects, these are still on your projects list. I would have these listed in my book. I would have Awesome Fitness written down, and then underneath it, I would say, I have to design a logo, I have to do a website, I have to do business cards, I have to do flyer, I have to do poster. These are all projects. Now, when you look at each one of those projects, at this point, you need to decide whether you can break them down into smaller projects, or if they can be broken down into tasks. If they can be broken into tasks, then you write them on your to-do list. Now, let's take the example even further and look at, well, probably the first thing you would do in this branding is you're going to create the logo design for Awesome Fitness. So, of course, logo design is a project. But what can you break that project down into? Well, maybe your first step whenever you're doing a logo design is to create a mood board. Well, a mood board, is that a project or a task? I personally see it as a project, because in order to create a mood board, there are several tasks involved. You want to look at fonts. So you're going to go out and look at a whole bunch of different fonts to see which one might suit the logo that you're designing. You're going to go look at color schemes and color ideas. You might look at different design styles, other fitness and gym logos, or just what sort of styles you want to go with. You might look at some sort of iconography. Do you want a little symbol or something to go with the logo? Well, you might look at different things. So all of those little things, those are the tasks involved with just creating a mood board. And the mood board is a sub-project under the project of creating a logo design. And then once you have that mood board created, then you can go in and create all the individual tasks involved with making the logo. So now you've looked at the mood board, the client maybe has seen it, or maybe it's just something you're keeping for yourself, the client doesn't see it, and you start looking at everything. And then you say, okay, well, I like a certain style of fonts. Now you're going to go through your font list and pick the font or fonts that you want to try for the logo. Now that, I would say, is a task. Go through and choose a font or a few fonts that you want to try with the logo. Maybe you want to try the design style. Well, now you're going to figure out what design style you want. Colors. You're going to go through and pick the colors you want to try for the logo. Yes, I always say design a logo in black and white first, show it to the client in black and white. But I still like to have an idea for colors before. Even though I'm going to show it to him in black and white, I still, in my mind, like to know where I'm going with it. Now, those are individual tasks. When you're looking through your font list and trying to pick, maybe you want 2, 3, a dozen, I don't know. Sometimes it depends on the logo. I'll start off with maybe 2 or 3 fonts, different fonts to try. Some logos I'll start off with 20 fonts to try. But that is one task. Go through my font list. And that's why I said at the beginning, tasks can take a couple of minutes or it could take hours. And if you're anything like me with the size of the font list, if you go through the entire thing, it could possibly take several hours just going through the font list and trying to figure out which would be the best font. But that is a single task. You're doing one thing. You're looking through your font list, picking out the fonts. Once you have the fonts chosen, whether it's 2, 10, 20, once those fonts are chosen and you move on to the next step, that task is now complete. You've gone through and you've chosen fonts. Same thing with colors. When you're going through and you're trying to look at different color combinations, you might not know the exact combination you're going to end with, but there might be certain combinations, like maybe you want a nice burgundy and a gray color, very rich for a fitness place, or maybe you want to go with a blue and a yellow. Well, you pick all these different color combinations. That's one task, picking these color combinations. And once you have 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that you like, then that task is done. You don't have to worry about color combinations anymore. You've already picked them. So that task is done and you scratch it off your list. Now, let's look at a different project for Awesome Fitness. They want you to design a website for them. Well, let's break that one down into tasks. I mean, it's very easy to say design a website, but design a website could entail a whole lot of things. There might be some tasks involved. There might be some sub-projects involved. All depends. But let's break it down. They don't have a domain name. So maybe you're going to register a domain name. You're going to choose and set up hosting. That could be either 1 or 2 tasks, depending. You're going to install your CMS, such as WordPress or whatever. Then you're going to choose and install a theme. Then you're going to install basic plugins. Maybe not the plugins that you need later on, but just the basic plugins like your backup, your security plugins, and the basic ones. At that point, just like the logo, maybe you want to choose a color scheme. Or if the color scheme was already chosen for the logo, you don't have to do this. But maybe you can go through and maybe it's just a matter of figuring out what the Pantone colors that were chosen for the logo, what are the hexadecimal equivalents for the website? So you get those. You get the colors ready. Then same thing with the fonts. I mean, there was a time when you only had 6 or 7 fonts to choose for a website, but now with web fonts available, you can have thousands of fonts available to you. Well, you need to choose fonts for the website. That's a task. And then you go on and forward and forward. Now, one thing to keep in mind, whenever you're doing something like a website, all these individual tasks, you can actually create a checklist for this sort of thing if it's something you do on a regular basis. Whenever I install or whenever I start a website for a client, I have a checklist I go to of what I have to do in order to get it done, which includes registering a domain if need be, or transferring a domain, or getting access to the domain, depending on how that situation is, setting up the hosting, installing WordPress or whatever platform they're going to work on, choosing the theme, installing the theme, and then I've got a list of all the plugins so that I don't miss anything. I've got my basic plugins that I install on every single client site that I build. So I have my list, and these are all tasks, and it's very easy. Install plugins. Yes, I have it on my task list, but then I break it down into the even smaller tasks, which are install Backup Buddy, install Coming Soon, install the security plugin, install the whatever. I have a list of the plugins that I install on every website. These are all individual tasks because they are simple things to do and they only require one action on my part. If the task says install Backup Buddy plugin on the website, as soon as Backup Buddy is installed, I check it off. It's done. And I move on to the next task. And see, that's the thing. With these tasks, these simple one step, whether they take 2 minutes, 2 hours, or 10 hours, they are a single step. And as you complete each one of these tasks and check them off your to-do list, you'll feel like you're accomplishing things and making progress. Because if all you had on your list was design website for awesome fitness, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you did, all the things you got done. At the end of the day, you'd look at your list and that's still on your list. It would have to be moved. If you're making a new list every day or whatever, it would have to be moved over. And you might not feel like you're getting anywhere. This is also one of the major contributions or contributors to procrastination. Sometimes people procrastinate. I've mentioned on the podcast before that I'm a big procrastinator. Going back to school, I used to love just waiting to the last minute. But a lot of times, it's not just the fun of it or that. Sometimes you look at a project and the project might seem overwhelming and you're not sure where to start. Maybe you've been designing websites for a long time and all of a sudden you got a client that wants an e-commerce site and you've never actually done an e-commerce site. You've heard that they're pretty simple and built in with WordPress. There's a lot of easy things to get an e-commerce site done. But if you've never actually done one, that might seem a little daunting. And maybe that project keeps getting pushed off. Like you keep telling yourself, well, tomorrow I'm going to tackle that project. And then tomorrow comes and you do all sorts of other things. And at the end of the day, you haven't done anything on that project yet. So it gets pushed off to the next day. And you say, well, tomorrow, I'm definitely going to have to work on it tomorrow. And then that day comes. And at the end of the day, you still haven't, because every time you look at it, you are just overwhelmed with everything involved with that project that you don't do anything. And that's what I'm saying. If you break them down into tasks, it makes it a lot easier because it's little steps that you can take. And no, you might not be tackling the whole project, but you're chipping away at it. And once you get started, you will feel like you're doing something, and then you're not going to be pushing it off. That's the trick. Chip away at it by doing these little individual tasks, and they will eventually add up to a completed project. Take a look at your to-do list. Are there any items on the list that keep repeating, that are still there day after day, and they just seem to not want to get done, or not that they don't, but you're just apprehensive about starting them? Sometimes on your to-do list, there might be stuff that is not important. And if you really don't want to do them, maybe you can just simply delete them. But as I said, if you do use this system, it should be easy because they're tasks. And maybe when you're looking at an item, especially if you are using this system where you put tasks down, and if there's a certain task that for some reason you're just not wanting to get to, there's a possibility that that task could actually be a project in disguise. And that you have to look at it and break it down even further into individual tasks in order to accomplish it. I mentioned earlier about the mood board and how some people might say, well, that's a task, put together a mood board. But I broke it down and said, you can actually divide that into smaller tasks. Find a font, find colors, find textures, find styles. All those are individual tasks. So as one person might put down mood board on their to-do list, and that would be good for them, somebody else might need to break it down into the individual tasks. Because say you're putting together the mood board, you could say, well, today I'm going to go find a font and I'm going to find colors, but I don't have time to get to looking for styles in that or whatever else. But by finding a font and by choosing some colors or color combinations, you have taken a few steps to completing that mood board. So at the end of the day, you can't say, well, I haven't done this. You've worked, you've chipped away at it. It's getting done. It might not be complete, but it is getting done. Some of the tasks involved in that project are being done. So the trick is to make your tasks as simple as possible in order to accomplish them. And this is especially true of tasks that you might not be too keen on doing. As I mentioned, especially the ones that you keep putting off or finding excuses not to do. Preparing your taxes, that's a big one. That is a project that most people really they're not keen, and you don't wake up in the morning and go, yay, today I'm going to get everything ready for my taxes. No, that's something that people put on their list and go, well, I'll do that tomorrow, or I got to get this done by the end of the week. And maybe the end of the week comes and you haven't done it. But you can chip away at it by breaking it down into its smaller tasks. What do you need to do to prepare your taxes? Well, you need to gather all your receipts from the previous year. Well, that's one task. Gather your receipts. Now, that task can later, once that task is complete, maybe be divided into other tasks. Like in my case, gathering all my receipts would be one task. Once I have all my receipts for the previous year, that task is done. Now, once I have those receipts, then I want to divide them up. Which ones are going to be part of automotive? Which ones are going to be business expenses? Which ones are meal expenses or travel expenses? That would be another task, dividing up the receipts. And maybe that day, that's all I'll do is just divide them up into individual categories. And maybe I'll add them up or total them up if need be. Or that can be a separate task. Once they're divided up into their individual categories, then maybe I could put a task down that says, calculate or total up all the receipts in each category. And that would be another task. Then there's your income reports and your expenses and all those things. Everything involved with putting your taxes together can be broken down into individual tasks, and you accomplish them one at a time. And eventually, that whole project of preparing your taxes, getting everything together to ship off to your accountant will be done. Here's another one that most designers dread to do. Trying to attract new clients, especially through something like cold calling. In order to accomplish this, the easiest thing to do is to break it down into its individual components, the tasks involved. Identify the clients you want to contact. That's a task. Acquire their phone numbers or email addresses. That's a task. Identify the person at the company that you want to contact or reach out to. Well, that's a task as well, although that one should probably be done before you get the phone number and email. It would make it easier. So reverse those around. And maybe you want to do some research into the company so that when you do finally contact them, you'll know a little bit about them. So those are some individual tasks. And once you get all that stuff completed, then it'll be a lot easier. You won't have any more excuse. You know about the company. You know who you need to contact at the company. You have their contact information. Now it's just a matter of calling them. And yes, that is probably the scariest of all these tasks. But at this point, you won't have the excuse anymore of all the other things that came before it, because they will all be checked off and done. And just like any project, the hardest part is simply getting started. You've heard the saying that every journey begins with a single step. That's what this whole idea of projects and tasks is about, taking that first single step. Now, as you start practicing this method of creating tasks and projects, in order to figure everything out, you may have to actually create a task of figuring out what the tasks are in the project. That might be your very first task to do, is to figure out what tasks are involved. But once you get used to it, you'll realize that this method is really not that hard. In fact, at some point, once you get really good at identifying the tasks within the projects, you won't have to write down everything. It'll become second nature to you. I've been using this method for so long now that when it comes to, say, a logo design, I don't have to write down, go find the font, go find the colors. I just know those are the steps involved. And we should at some point get to that point, for lack of a better word, in our ability where you sit down to do a logo design and you know what's involved. But until you're there, write them all down and check them off as you go. Remember, the objective here is productivity. But productivity can be a tricky concept. You can spend an entire day working and feel at the end of the day like you haven't really accomplished anything. I'm sure we've all been there. And that's why by creating a to-do list of tasks instead of projects, at the end of the day, you'll feel the satisfaction with every item that you've checked off your list. You can look at it and say, look at everything I've done. So make as many tasks as possible. Break them down into their smallest possible components. Even if those small components only take a minute or two to complete, write them down. And if you do this, if you get used to doing this, of creating tasks on your to-do list as opposed to projects, then I guarantee that at the end of the day, instead of feeling like you haven't really accomplished anything that you didn't do, you feel like you haven't really worked, you'll look at your to-do list. You'll see everything that you scratched off, all the progress you've made, and you'll think to yourself, I rocked it today. Look at everything I got done. Projects and tasks. It's how we do it. It's how we stay productive. Now, did you find this episode helpful? Or do you already break your projects down into their individual tasks? I would love to hear from you. Simply visit the show note page for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 66 and leave a comment there for me. I look forward to reading them. And now, this week's question of the week. This week's question comes in from Hannah. And Hannah wrote, I'm currently working for a real estate company in the US as their marketer/graphic designer. I began working for them fresh out of college and have been with them for 3 years now. learning a lot in the process, but would like to start the transition to a home-based designer at some point. However, leaving the consistency of the corporate world and into a freelancing will be a major hurdle. Do you have any tips on establishing a relatively steady income without the help of a spouse, family member's income? Well, thank you for the question, Hannah. And yes, this is a very scary and stress-inducing thing for anybody who wants to make the jump from corporate world to self-employment. I know when I did it, it was a big step. It was, I sat down, you mentioned not having a family member or a spouse. Now, I had my wife and we sat down and we talked. And at some point, we just realized that I needed to do this for myself. And I had a great job. It was great people to work with at the printing company. I still go in there and I love going to visit them. But I just realized that my career, I was never going to progress as a graphic designer by staying there. It was too much of the same thing day in, day out. And maybe that's what you're feeling at this real estate company. Now, at some point, you're just going to have to jump in. Now, what you can do is, like in my case, I actually started my company and I ran for a year before I left the print shop. Now, in that case, I was doing print design there and I did web design at home. And it wasn't to the point where at some point my web clients were asking me for print design. And I kept saying, well, I can't do that. That's a conflict of interest because my job at the printer is where I do print design. And if you want it, you have to come there. And if the client didn't want to deal with them, then it was causing some issues. So eventually I left the printing company so that I can offer all the services to my clients. Now, you're in a different boat where you're not working for something like a printing company where there would be a conflict of interest. So what you could do is start a company on the side and start trying to attract a few clients here or there to do things. Now, I would avoid anything in the real estate industry because of that whole conflict of interest thing. If you're working for a real estate company, you don't want to do freelance work for a different or a competing real estate company. But there's nothing wrong for you creating designs for a plumber, an electrician, for a flower shop, whatever, wedding invitations, baby showers, that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with you using your skills to do that sort of thing and to start advertising yourself. Unless you have some sort of agreement with this real estate company or if anybody else, if you have an agreement with the company you're working for that says you won't use your services outside of that company, if you don't have something like that in place, there's nothing stopping you from starting to get some work outside your regular day job. And the idea is to start building up a little bit of an income there. Now, depending on where you are, you mentioned you're in the US, but depending on whether you're living in a big city, in a small town, how much money you should have saved up, because you will need some savings. I won't lie to you, it'll be tough. Most designers who make the jump from corporate to home-based find the first year or so are very tough, and you really need some savings in order to get you through that. But if you really concentrate, and trust me, whenever that's what you're living off is your savings and you see those savings going down, then that is a very big incentive for you to really dig deep and build your business, go out and hunt clients down and get the work you need, because you don't want your savings account to reach zero and you still not have an income. So it's a great incentive. And many, many designers that I know that are working for themselves have gone through that. And in fact, most of them say that even though they had that little tough time at the beginning when they did jump ship, quote unquote, jump ship, even though they had that difficult time, they all said it was worth it. And I know myself, after 11 going on 12 years, or has it already been 12 years? 11, anyways, whatever, after all these years, I never regret a minute starting my own company. Even though there has been hard times, there's been times where income wasn't coming in very well. And there's been other times where I couldn't believe everything that was coming in. So there's always that up and down curve, or wave, maybe you can call it. But it is well worth it. And as I said, I would never go back to working for somebody. After doing this for so long, I could never see myself back in a 9-to-5 type job. But as for what you should do, save up some money, whatever you can. Once you figure that you have enough money to live for whatever, as I said, it all depends on where you live. If you're living in New York City, you might need to save up a lot more than if you were living in some rural country town or something like that. but save up a couple of months or several months worth of salary. And once you have that, as I said, you can do this as you're doing work on the side, but build it up slowly. And then when you feel comfortable, when you think you have the work, you have some clients already, then take the plunge and leave your current job and concentrate full time on your business. And one thing, Hannah, that I want you and everybody else listening to know is you don't need a graphic designer working for themselves does not need a ton of clients. You can get by with just a handful. I know very successful designers out there that only have 5 or 6 clients, and that's all they do work for. I know myself, even though if I look through my my program billings that I use for my invoicing, I can look through and I probably have, 100 clients listed there. But that's because every client I've ever worked for since I started my business is listed there. And I could say that the majority of them I haven't done work for in years, or they might not even be around anymore. The companies are closed and that, but they're still listed in my billings program. But I have them in a folder with defunct or old clients. But current clients that I do regular work for, I would say there's probably less than a dozen clients that I have that I can honestly say I do work for. And when I say regularly, at least once a year that I do work for. Less than a dozen. And there's probably less than 6 clients that I do work for on a quarterly basis. But it's enough to keep me going. It's enough to create a good income for me. And in talking with other designers, most of them are in a similar situation. Once you find those good clients, you only need a handful of them in order to support you. And the last thing I want to say on this, Hannah, is whenever you are setting up, don't be afraid to charge what you are worth. You may be getting a salary. You're probably getting a salary from the real estate company. And whatever that salary is, you're going to be able to charge a lot more for your design services when you're on your own. Don't be afraid. Don't think that, oh, this doesn't feel right. No, it does feel right. That's what you should be getting. I remember when I left the printing company, I calculated that I had to work 10 billable hours a week in order to make the same salary that I was making working 40 hours a week at the print shop. And when you only need to work 10 billable hours a week to make that same salary, that gives you a lot of time to concentrate on building your business. And imagine just trying to get the work. You only need to fill, like in my case, I only needed to fill 10 hours of billable work. And that wasn't hard to do with just a handful of clients. So yes, it is a scary situation, but Hannah, trust me, it is well worth it. Almost every designer I know that has made the leap to solopreneur, to home-based business, has told me that they don't regret it and they would never go back to working the 9-to-5 for another company. So good luck. I wish you all the best, Hannah. And I would love to hear from you when you finally do make that leap and let me know how things are going. Now, if you would like me to answer your question in a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and send me a message. Now, before I go, I want to share another great iTunes review I received. This one's from Nosh from the USA. He says, "Thank you. I'm a computer science teacher in California trying to earn extra money on the side as a web designer. I teach kids all day to code and create websites, and I thought I could offer help to businesses who are not happy with their service. Your podcast has been a great intro into the life of a designer and has given me some great tips to keep in mind while I grow my business." Well, thank you, Nosh. I appreciate that. That's amazing that you're teaching kids to code and to create websites. I think that's absolutely amazing, but I also think that's really scary that something that only a handful of people used to be able to do, now they're actually teaching it to kids. And I am afraid that in 10, 15 years from now, it might be difficult for us to get web design jobs or good web design jobs with the amount of people that come up that will already know web design, whether they go into web design or not. They can go into any profession. They will have the skill and knowledge because they learned it in school, things that we weren't privy to or weren't given that opportunity. So hats off to you, Nosh, for doing that. But I do believe it's a two-edged sword that may come back and bite us in the end. But still, great thing you're doing for the kids. And thank you very much for that kind iTunes review. Now, if you would like to leave your review in iTunes for me, simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and I will read your review on the podcast. So before I go, I just want to remind you of this week's resource, which is Udemy. And as I mentioned, until April 1st, 2017, if you are listening to this as I publish it, you only have a couple of days left to purchase almost any one of their courses for only $10. Simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Udemy promo and pick up the classes you want. And if you are enjoying this podcast and you are finding it useful, please share it with a fellow graphic designer. I would be forever grateful. Until next time, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.